Chapter 10 Mother Jones, Judeo-Christian Principles. Mother Jones, Philanthropy and Political Activism. This article starts off with historical details about Holland and Michigan in a storytelling fashion, talking about how certain rules keep everything in order while maintaining prosperity. Not whistling at night, tearing decayed fences and sheds down, lawn maintenance, and restricted alcohol sales somehow maintains that order and prosperity. Not only that, but rules are necessary for things like fences and sheds, along with grass growth. Common sense doesn't cover those. Whistling at night causes chaos, apparently. People couldn't know of all of this without religion. That needs to be pointed out. Sarcasm aside. Maybe not. This article is being sarcastic now, saying Betsy is the nation's top-ranking education official. Also, her inability to answer questions, along with her marriage to the hateful billionaire who spends lots of his wealth on hate. And finally, their obsession with religious private schools. By the way, I don't believe the fences, sheds, alcohol, or lawn maintenance, keep order or prosperity thing is true. I was just saying they shouldn't need religion to teach them that, if it was true. Arlen Lanting denies that Betsy is against public schools. Even if she isn't, she still isn't qualified to be secretary, because she has no experience with public schools at all. She hasn't even attended one. Betsy has also bought her way into that position, as Kyle Kulinski and others have critically pointed out. Arlen also said, in Dick and Betsy's defense, that they have given public schools money. How much? Arlen believes Donald is going to bring Christ into the world. What does Christ have to do with economic growth and competition? Dick and Betsy are acting as philanthropists to push their Christian agenda. What doesn't make sense here, though, is that Betsy says philanthropy isn't enough for education needs. She also said they're trying to confront the culture. What does that even mean? God's kingdom is heaven. What does culture have to do with heaven? She first mentioned philanthropy isn't enough for education needs, then talked about their desire to confront culture to continue advancing God's kingdom, in one sentence divided by a pause. Two completely different things. The low marks segment of this Mother Jones article. 1. I would have asked her what she confused the law with. 2. I would have asked her why she refuses to say she does support equal accountability, even which types of schools she does support equal accountability for, and why not the others. 3. How can free college tuition be possible, if nothing in life is truly free? 4. Why doesn't Betsy understand the difference between proficiency and growth, especially when the issue is a basic concept? 5. Why did Betsy allow this clerical error to go on for 12 years? 6. That didn't sound like a joke. However, I think Joe Rogan took care of this one. I don't know what to say about it. The first sentence of the next paragraph, Dick's own quote, shows their true agenda. They want public schools gone to prevent them from taking the communities over from the churches. This paragraph has better clarified what these charters actually do, so I now understand them better. Which also provides me clarity of the deviant agenda going on. The act of taking the faster learning students from the public schools, also depriving those schools of funding, is unethical. This hurts the students with special needs. This is definitely bullshit. This means the public schools aren't bad. The DeVosses and anybody else involved in this agenda are bad. Donald also wants to transfer students from the failing schools, when instead he should find out why they're failing and do something about those failures. He's obviously just using their failure as an excuse to move the students to these charters, which are religious. Dick and Betsy have been quiet about their religious views in relation to their charity and political activism because they know they are mentally ill, with these efforts which are dedicated to homophobia, using religion to back their hatred up. They're obviously open about the money to make themselves look good. This article perceives their view of educational choice and competition from their philanthropic record. Does anybody else? If so, why is nobody questioning them about this? In the beginning, the Dutch government changing the songbooks and not allowing discrimination anymore were enough to cause a rebellion. The citizens are just worse than the government sometimes. The church members also didn't like unions because they viewed them as a form of socialist freedom that defied the church's authority. So, nobody is allowed protection from other people because the church approves of screwing people over. These Dutch farmers immigrated to America to avoid modernization, only to ironically face the same social progression there, with both the support of public schools and the unions. Back to the DeVos time. Erik Prince is guilty of overbilling and human rights abuses, who now advises Donald. I'll get to him later though. As far as religiously forbidden activities, what I think doesn't matter. However, I will say that everybody has the right to restrict themselves. It's when people try to push their religious way of life onto others that it becomes wrong. In the DeVos case, they're effectively trying to push their views onto the entire country. Then there's this evangelical movement that both the Prince and DeVos families have allied themselves with, to fight against the 1960s cultural revolution. See, Christians, this is what atheists are talking about when they argue political interference and religious activism against social and economic progress. In argument against you, whenever you cower down and lick your wounds with, "Can't we just respect each other's beliefs?" after they've shut your fallacies and tactics down. The Acton Institute Think Tank Mission Philosophy. The header itself is vague. What are the religious principles? I would ask how those principles promote social virtuosity, or even what they have to do with liberty, but I don't even know what those principles even are. This Mother Jones article says Betsy once served this institute, which is vague. Does that mean she no longer does? I'll break this mission statement down regardless. The absolute power quote is mentioned, which I'm guessing is what John Acton believes and stands by. However, unrestrained capitalism would enable anybody with power to commit as much corruption as they want. How can this institution endorse unrestrained capitalism? Either Mother Jones is wrong or lying, or Acton is lying about that. If Mother Jones is at fault here, this makes the rest of this article questionable. I'll carry on anyway, because that's what I'm doing. If this Mother Jones article is bad information, all of that bad information should be corrected, or the entire article should have been removed from the internet. John's societal vision is that of freedom and virtuosity. However, neither a definition or an explanation of his idea of those qualities is provided in this statement. This is especially important due to Betsy being a part of the presidential administration, but I guess we have to do without. Religious leaders are not economists, and their ministries have nothing to do with economics. So, what economic issues ever rise in any religious ministry that would require economic principles as analytic tools? While entrepreneurs already contribute to the world, why are business people obligated to give of themselves to any community? If the doctrine that Jesus Christ taught to give to the poor also applies to Calvinism, then I get that. If that's what the idea here is. Only if those business people are Calvinists, though, and agree with this obligation. Philosophy applies to economics, but theology does not. This aspect of the mission statement is a big problem. Again though, there's no explanation of what theological economics would mean, so there's nothing to comment on or question. The discrimination is the only thing that comes to my mind. Very strange. Robert Sirico wants religious charities to replace welfare programs, but shouldn't the idea be to solve the problem, not throw money at problems? Why do people only think in terms of money, authority, and war? Yet, these religious people believe this world is screwed up because man isn't following God, while these people can't think outside of those three things? To try suggesting other ideas is to only result in them claiming human nature. Ronald Nash made a strong religious assertion. No explanation as usual, just a baseless claim. The spine of the assertion is the term progress. The definition of that term, or his understood definition, is needed there to determine whether this assertion is actually true, because we can't know if either secular or religious education is progress of American education. The Foundation for Traditional Values is simply another organization that seeks to politically push religion onto everybody. The Constitution specifies religious freedom, not mandatory religious belief, which makes this organization non-constitutional because it's actively causing religious interference through politics. This organization is abusing politics. This organization is also trying to claim that American freedom is based on the influence of faith and family, whatever that even means. This is another case of definition clarity: freedom. Because Betsy DeVos is now in the presidential administration and now controls American education, and has been or still is involved in the following organizations, I will proceed to criticize these organizations in the context that the Constitution only protects religious belief and doesn't mandate religious belief. The Citizens for Traditional Values mission: preserve the Judeo-Christian embodiment of American freedom. Principle 1. Reliance upon God's providence. If parents don't want their children to be taught about the Lord, forcing those parents to place their children in a school to be taught is unconstitutional. If parents do, that's their business. God also provided free will, so those parents who do force their children into a religion are blaspheming against this Lord. They will be left to answer to this Lord, because God gave the free will so that man will choose to obey God on his own. If the parents don't want their children to go to hell, they need to keep in mind that they're the ones who side with this God, while also being the ones who had those children under their faith in this God, who created hell and the rules. This statement also talks about peace, oppression, and also fear and terror, but doesn't give any context. It then talks about a weapon, and rising against thee in judgment and condemnation. Wouldn't children be terrified and even given nightmares by this teaching? Where's the peace in this? What's strange is, the American founding ideal doesn't mention anything about the weapon, judgment, or condemnation. Principle 2. Human law is from God's law. A few psalms of word salad about the Lord's law being perfect. There is no context or explanation here to comment on or question. If these people want private schools for religious education, maybe they should also have their own court of law for themselves. This means keep their religious-based laws to themselves, if such laws aren't implemented for protection against the harm of others. Principle 3. Religion and morality-based liberty. The roots part only talks about liberty, without context or explanation, then denounces wickedness. What is the correlation between liberty and wickedness or sin? The second part is wrong. Again, the Constitution only protects religious freedom. The Constitution does not exclude other people. This part also claims the impossibility to govern without God or the Bible, yet America is not a theocracy. Aside from the Constitution, we have an economy that requires a lot of laws because many people are mentally ill and dishonest. What does God or the Bible say about various aspects and components of our monetary economy? I've only heard about slavery, other than thou shalt not steal. Principle 4. Man's equality. The first part talks about God's superiority and judgment, rather than man's equality. I guess the idea is supposed to be that every man is subject to equality under God's judgment, not liberty. The Constitution is about man's liberty and happiness, so this principle is contradictory to America's Constitution. I guess these truths are only held to be self-evident that all of man is equal to God's judgment, not liberty. Principle 5. God-given human rights. God creating man in his image is only a statement, true or false. God telling man to be fruitful and multiply, along with having dominion over fish and all other species of life, are more of expectations than rights. Modern society is far more advanced and complex than the Bible, than being fruitful and having dominion anyway. The American founding ideal mentions happiness and liberty, but as usual, no explanations, context, or examples are provided. The previous principle only brought wickedness up, which has nothing to do with liberty. Principle 6. Government authority by consent of the governed. The definition of republic is both the people and their elected representatives having supreme power. The fact that these people are trying to achieve the preservation of these roots and principles means they want the supreme power to push their views onto everybody. This is a big problem. These people are after power. They aren't interested in problem solving. Principle 9. Accept the Sabbath. This is about labor. The Sabbath is to be kept holy, as the Lord did nothing on that day. This means the cabinet, Congress, and all Christian politicians should resign if they want to obey God's laws, as politics should be secular. As for the bills not being returned by the president, I don't know what that means. Principle 10. Church and state separation. So, the Judeo-Christian roots are self-contradictory toward one of its own principles? Sure, this would be freedom. However, the DeVos family and these organizations alike are all trying to achieve a theocracy. Principle 11. Teaching liberty law. Teach the kids to avoid wickedness and sin and humbling themselves to God instead of liberty? How can submission be a law of liberty? Before I continue here, I want to mention a YouTube video I've clicked on, which was in my home feed. This video is from Rationality Rules. He debunks the myth that America was founded upon these Judeo-Christian values. There isn't really anything I could comment on about what he said, although I think I've handled these principles sufficiently. This video link is in my source list. Now, going back to the Citizens for Traditional Values website homepage, the court of law exists to protect that God-given right to life. This site doesn't explain what a free enterprise philosophy of government is. An enterprise is either a business or project, so I'm guessing this organization seeks to promote a government project, obviously about their religious views. I can agree about excessive taxation and regulation. However, Christianity is given special treatment in America, so this request makes no sense. If government schools are insufficient and the government isn't providing educational freedom, it's the responsibility of all parents to demand the government reform public education. What's the point of having a government otherwise? Parental choice of schooling isn't the answer, because they're only running from the government, which is supposed to be serving people. These organizations are clearly using public schools as an excuse to push their religious agenda. They would otherwise force the government to change. Those seceders left Holland in rebellion against the government because it stopped letting them discriminate. Then people separated from the church because of unions and strikes, as they defied the church's authority. Now they're trying to go a major step further by eliminating public schools. Having looked at the principles of the Judeo-Christian roots, not only are they nonsense, but none of them hold any relevance to the Constitution. They also have nothing to do with the constitutional applications. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say the Bible isn't about man, because it's all about God. That's why the only rights are being fruitful and having dominion over the planet. That's God telling people how to survive. God can't do anything with life if it goes extinct on him. Chapter 10 note. The information of the Judeo-Christian roots comes from the blog from the National Center for Constitutional Studies website. I've skipped some of the principles because they had nothing to do with religion. Chapter 16. Donald nullifies stream protection rule. Scott Pruitt approved. Donald's Florida rally. The Republican insanity is showing, with the elimination of Barack's stream protection rule, which means waste dumping is now allowed. I've covered the Congressional Review Act in Chapter 15, and here it is, the Republicans using this act to undo this rule. I asked why they want to do this in that chapter. This Fox article says Donald wants to revive the coal industry, and also for the simple and ignorant reason that they can eliminate this rule. Donald spent almost an hour defending his cabinet in that press conference. Why aren't those cabinet members trying to intervene? They're outstanding and respected people, right? The miners obviously don't care either. They would otherwise go on strike against this economically psychotic move. They're only enabling Donald in Congress by going to work. This craziness completely diminishes Donald's credit of job creation, whatever really happened here, as he gloated about that during his press conference. Natural gas is putting coal off the market, and Donald still wants coal back for the sake of creating jobs. The economy is more important than the environment to Donald. Never mind that such jobs will make lots of people sick and even die. This isn't job creation. Leave job creation to the entrepreneurs, Donald. If natural gas is the future of consumer energy, then let the economy evolve and stop politically interfering with it, at the expense of the environment, wildlife, and human health. ISIS continues to be a huge problem, but the US isn't ready to form an alliance with Russia, while Donald also wants to have a relationship with this country. The CNN article says Russia was both aggressive and destabilizing, according to James Mattis. Clicking on an embedded link, the other NATO members aren't providing sufficient financial support. So, how is anything supposed to get done in this world with leaders who are irresponsible and mentally unstable? Donald has proven himself to be severely economically irresponsible and has no concept of politics with his favoritism of successful and wealthy people, while Russia can't even get their act together to fight against a global threat. These are governments. Russia has fired a missile to violate the international law, like a rebellious teenager, while most of these 29 NATO members are being financially neglectful. These aren't lay people who are struggling to make ends meet, but nationally empowered groups of people who use the taxes of those lay people. These governments also behave like mafia families most of the time. Day Without Immigrants, 2017. I can appreciate this effort. However, these people are naive. Donald doesn't care. Donald is in office because both he and his supporters are anti-immigration. Donald also favors the wealthy and successful. He even said he admires such people. Donald will also damage the environment for the sake of job creation and profit. Last but certainly not least, Donald will also ignore the Constitution to achieve his fascist and bigoted policies, which is why he only has certain people in his cabinet. Donald is only in office to cater to both his own interests and his wealthy friends and associates, and is obviously using illegal immigration to keep America white with the travel ban along with the wall, which will never be built, but the attitude is there. Scott Pruitt is an environmentalist, so his confirmation is very ironic after Donald and Congress did away with the coal mining rule. Scott's Wikipedia page had a picture of protesters on it, in the nomination and confirmation segment. So after searching for videos on YouTube and clicking on 2 YouTube videos, the protesters pointed out that Scott is going to diminish the Environmental Protection Agency. Scott Pruitt supporter Myron Ebell explained that Scott can now help Donald implement his EPA agenda, while Scott's opponent Jeremy Simons claims that Scott is so extreme. So, digging into this, I'm going to find out what the case with this guy actually is. He's also both pro-life and anti-gay marriage, along with Anti-Affordable Care Act. So those positions explain Donald's other political interests in Scott. Scott also opposed environmental regulations. Looking at Wikipedia's menu, Scott also denies climate change, another red flag and obvious reason for Donald nominating him. I'll look at that afterwards. I would like to know what this activist agenda is that Scott believes the EPA is trying to push. Wikipedia has Scott's activist agenda statement in quotes, so the author doesn't know either. Although this paragraph mentions all of Scott's 14 lawsuits, which are all against EPA's attempts to protect the environment. I would say Scotty is the one with the activist agenda, as he sues for all of these efforts. He certainly is not an environmentalist. I now understand why Donald has nominated Scott, especially after Donald just got finished ending Barack's stream protection rule. Scott can now assist Donald in his raid against the environment for his job creation quest. Referring to the YouTube video, Myron Ebell is obviously also anti-environment, as he supports Scott. He only said Scott can advocate and implement Donald's EPA agenda. He didn't specify Scott taking legal action against the EPA on its environmental protection efforts. I also observed Myron's constant gleeful facial expression as Jeremy pointed out the damage Scott deliberately caused. Scott excludes carbon monoxide though. Maybe he's up to something that involves carbon monoxide emissions. Now for his position on climate change. Scott rejects the scientific consensus. What is this rejection based on though? That assessment alone is pure arrogance. Scott knows better than the scientific consensus? This guy only knows how to file lawsuits to screw the EPA over in order to endanger the environment, from what I've read. He said human activity contributes a little, just because he thinks so? Scott also said he doesn't believe human activities, carbon monoxide specifically. Do scientists deal in terms of belief? Who asked him what he believes? He also said, measuring with precision, from my perspective, the degree of human contribution is very challenging. What the hell does that mean? Scott then declared that the global warming debate is far from over, because he said it isn't? When does it end? When too much damage is done? When nobody can do anything? Naomi Klein mentioned, as written in The Guardian, that Justin Trudeau is partially guilty in this pipeline project, and he's a liberal. The rally in Melbourne, Florida had some reiteration, so I'll just never mind those parts. He started his speech off by complimenting Melania's prayer to the Lord, which was actually both inappropriate and unconstitutional because religion has nothing to do with America. I don't even understand why the Constitution says anything about God. Donald is also making this about him and them, complimenting them because they're his supporters. Continuing with some self-aggrandizing empty words, making his presidency all about him. Being in a state he truly loves and claiming a great victory together, and being among his friends. This is a problem because while he appraises the people for being hard workers, they're politically inept by not solving social and economic problems by electing responsible politicians and getting the dishonest politicians out immediately. So there really is no victory here. He then said he has made America great again, but doesn't provide any examples of how he's done so. Shouldn't he be there for America? What's their vision of a better future? The crowd cheers at his words big, bold, and what this country is about, without Donald explaining these plans he mentioned. The crowd doesn't even know what they're cheering about. What does patriotism have to do with anything? Is America on the economic and social decline because not every American citizen is saluting the flag? Well, some might say so, but I don't think they would be able to explain why. Donald yet again complains about this fake news phenomenon, without providing a few critical examples, only accusing the media of not sourcing or even fabricating sources for their false stories. I'm not saying the media is never dishonest, as many people also complain about that a lot. But Donald is wrong and hypocritical right here, making claims without backing them up. He also mentioned that he inherited a mess. Politics will remain a mess until Americans start getting their priorities straight and start electing politicians who care about the country's people and the economy. People who also want to work with the other world leaders. Donald seemingly doesn't understand that media is supported by ratings. Ratings which people provide by buying, tuning into, and by clicking on their content. Which means his supporters are perpetuating the media, while he stands there at the podium announcing that he's going to stop their false stories. There's that word win again. Yes, winning is the spine of American politics. Wait a minute. Donald declared that they aren't going to let the media tell them how to think or live. Is that why Donald is president instead of Bernie Sanders? Is that why all of these people are attending Donald's rally here? Because they're rebelling against fake news? Was the media lying about immigration, unemployment, healthcare, and ISIS? I guess 9/11 is also fake news? Does this also mean America has never really been under any attacks from other countries either? Therefore, war was never necessary because nobody was ever threatening America's freedom? Donald has been quick to ban Muslims from those 7 countries, fire Sally Yates, repeal both Obamacare and his stream protection rule, but yet he hasn't taken any action against the dishonest media. What's the holdup, Donnie? He then claimed the White House is running smoothly. So, cabinet members and associates mingling with Russia, firing on the spot for noncompliance, arguing with the Supreme Court, is his idea of the White House running smoothly? I've already explained my take on drug dealers, but not gangs. Donald has thrown drug dealers out of the country and intends to do the same with gangs. How does throwing them out of the country stop the mentality that caused the gangs to form to begin with? I can't let this pass, though. Donald has strengthened the borders to keep the drug dealers and gangs out, as they've seen on TV. Only a month has passed, and most of what I've covered is disgraceful. Some examples for now are ignoring Bernie Sanders about alternative energy when it came to the Dakota and Keystone pipelines, along with Donald's denial of climate change when he has given no valid debunking of it, his unconstitutional travel ban along with his irrational firing of Sally Yates, his bad choices for cabinet nominees, especially Betsy DeVos, his repeal of Barack's stream protection rule for the sake of profit. The context of Donald's repealing of the stream protection rule was job creation, economics. So I didn't get into the environmental facts about coal-based energy. He said coal is very clean at this rally, so I'll get into that now. Reading EnergyEducation.ca's information about coal, the opposite is true. Coal causes both air and water pollution, which are nitrogen oxides, sulfur, and particulate matter, along with greenhouse gases, carbon monoxide and methane. The water pollution is caused by using the water to clean the impurities out of the coal. See, a little bit of research and the facts are right there. I only typed coal energy into Google and clicked on this page. So how is NAFTA the problem when other countries are taking advantage of the stupidity of American politicians, as Donald said here? What other countries is Donald even referring to, and how are those countries taking advantage? I've only heard Donald talk about China. The dishonesty is just how most of the world is, which is why we have these regulations, acts, and such. So why blame the trade agreement if the American politicians are the problem? He just went from blaming the stupidity of politicians for other countries taking advantage of America to blaming companies for moving their business outside America and creating the tariffs to penalize them a minute later. It's called capitalism, Donald. It's not a nationalistic economic system. Capitalism doesn't salute a flag. It doesn't build walls. It doesn't fight wars. It doesn't imprison people. Penalizing companies for relocating their business outside America is not making America great again. It's making America fascist. People have a right to make money and go to where a better market is. Donald should understand this, being both a businessman and an admirer of success. All he's doing is condemning Americans for not achieving their success in America. This is hypocrisy. What's worse is, Donald just gave himself a pat on the back, mentioning that Japan thanked him for saving them millions of dollars. What does that have to do with America? Is Japan saving money going to bring American jobs back, using American products on Donald's terms? No. Donald incites the mass appeal madness by inviting a broadcaster over to his podium, a fan of Donald's. The crowd chanted, USA, for a few minutes. As a Canadian man of high school education, I can understand that the executive order is unconstitutional because that travel ban was directed at all immigrants from those 7 countries, not just the Muslim terrorists. I can also understand that it's only an order, not the Constitution or one of its many amendments. So why can't you understand that, Donald, being the President of the United States of America? It is the Supreme Court's constitutional responsibility to protect that Constitution, which he attempted to override with that order. Many immigrants were stranded in airports because visas were immediately canceled. Obama this, Obama that. Was Barack Obama the only other president in America? Is no other president responsible for the problems America has? For this mess Donald has inherited. Barack is Donald's scapegoat, which is just pathetic and annoying. America never has any bad ideas, only the rest of the world does? How is political correctness, social justice, an ideology that causes many people to become triggered by mere words, a good idea? How is feminism, a demasculation ideology that puts men in a social damned if you do, damned if you don't predicament, a good idea? How is censorship, a tactic used by people with an agenda or who have psychologically locked themselves into an ideological bubble to silence opposition, a good idea?